folks, welcome to the Front Room, the Phronesis Analytics podcast. Today we have Nathaniel Slaten. He's a Huntsville local and he is a project manager in the manufacturing industry. And so without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to the podcast to hear from him about how he is using AI to grow something with his data in his business.
In the manufacturing space since 2014, so a little over 10 years. A lot of the types of projects that I work on are like enterprise or network level. Do a lot of lean manufacturing, Six Sigma type stuff. So a lot of opportunities for AI that I see across that landscape.
I kind of know of some opportunities. I think some of the things that I would think of are probably not. I don't know the landscape well enough. So some of the things I think about are typically things like predictive maintenance, things like that for lines, helping with that Six Sigma application, being able to shift, giving new tools for shifting towards the the right part, right time kind of thing. Um, I'd like to hear what it is that you think, or some of the things that maybe you've tried, or the things that you've looked at that you might want to try, that would apply to the manufacturing that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really funny. I recently had obviously I have my boss and I'm going through a one-on-one, development with him as most professionals have, right? Um, and I recently had to fill out this like one-page slide that asked me a bunch of questions to give him information. And one of them was like, if I could stop doing something right now, what would it be? And he laughed at my answer. He thought it was unique to me. He said most people say things like stop procrastinating or work out more, that type of stuff. I put on there, I would stop doing administrative tasks immediately. And
Yeah.
he laughed at that and he was like, well, give me some examples of like how you would do that. And I told him, well, the first thing I would do was I would build an LLM and I would dump all of my policies for the company into it so that I, as a project manager, quit having to hunt these policies down to
Yes.
find an answer. I could just go to my LLM and say, hey, what are the certifications required for an electrician to be in my plant? Bam, right there. There's my list. Here's my source. All right, let's go find an electrician instead of spending 2 hours or an hour or waiting on an email.
I 100% agree. And I know a lot of people who are actually doing that, and I think that's a fantastic use case for LLMs. Possibly that might be one of the most immediate implementations where you can get like a lot of time bought back.
Yeah.
I know the struggle right now though is for stuff like that is people talk about hallucinations, and then secondarily on the business side of it, for all of us engineers who are trying to pitch ideas like this, it's hard for us to tell people what the ROI is, right? My typical like slant on it, which is the only way I've ever been able to sell it, is to say, I would like for my engineers to do engineering. I don't want my engineers doing HR, right? And I don't think anybody else does. I don't think anybody wants to, if we slant this towards firefighting, I want firefighters to fight fires. I don't want them to have to deal with HR documents, right? I don't
Yeah.
want them to have to go in and like search for these things and spend hours doing documentation. I want them to fight fires. That's what they signed up for. That's what
Yep.
I like to pay them for, right? With the tax dollars. So I think that's a great application, right? You want your production managers on the line to manage production.
Oh.
You don't want them going around reading the HR documentation. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's one. And I have, just so you know, I have also pitched that idea. I've pitched it to safety. The way I did this once was I went to our like corporate safety manager and I asked him a very specific question. Like, I mean, very nuanced question about some policy. And he was like, "Oh, well, you can go to this website or this repository to find it." And I was like, imagine if I didn't. have to go to that repository to find it.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
was like, "Oh."
Yeah.
But then nothing ever came of it.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one. Another one that I saw in a project, and again, I'll have to be generic, was at a manufacturing line in one of our facilities. So we make a component that we then ship to other plants to build like the end product, right?
Yep.
And when we're making this component, we use a die that we have to press, and we use heat as the catalyst for this. And we are trying to get this particular process under control to like a Six Sigma level. And long story short, we need a data point, or this other team. It's not my team that's working this project. It's the team that's running parallel to me. They need a data point that requires them to go inside of effectively an oven and measure variation in placement of this component in this oven. And it's like 300 degrees. You're not going to be able to crawl up in there, right?
Yeah.
So they were really concerned, like trying to brainstorm how to solve this. And I said, well, why don't you set up a camera? Just take a bunch of photos every time it places this widget into the press, and feed that whole photo library to a neural network and let it measure it for you. That way you get plenty of data, and you don't have to crawl inside a 300-degree oven to get that data. Nobody had thought of that before because people don't understand, again, like we were talking before you started recording, they don't understand how to use AI
Yeah.
in these types of settings. And I don't actually know if anything came out of my suggestion. I linked them up with our AI team,
Yeah.
um, and then just handed that ball off. But that would be one of them.
I think you're pointing out a very probably prevalent disconnect, right? Is that we have a lot of people who are AI engineers, right? A lot of software developers, and there's a big push for AI to remain only under like software engineering and software development. Um, and I get that, right? Um, and that disconnect comes from these people know like the capabilities of AI and like the applications, and that's disconnected from the people who are currently doing the work, right?
Yeah.
You have your AI engineers who understand what the capabilities are and how it operates in the background and how they can solve the problem, but they're disconnected from what the actual problem is. So like when you have those people on the line, like you're saying, like, and I think there are people who connect those two things, right? Like you're doing. But they don't, because they don't understand how AI operates, they don't know how it could be applied to solve this situation. I think specifically for that situation, it's like you get some cameras in there, you get something like an NVIDIA Spark or something like that that you guys could hook up to your network. Use something like Dino V3 and hook it up to your problem. You're gonna have to collect some data, train your model, but in the end, yeah, it can solve that problem for you. The swap of the business side is like your ROI. It's like how many parts are you wasting because people can't see that, right? It's a misalignment on the die. You had to throw it out. Probably difficult to estimate, or at least get your managers to buy in. And I see that a lot too, where it's like, hey, here's how many we wasted last year, right? And the flip side of that is like you show them the ROI is like I don't know, like a few $1,000s, right? That we lost because we had to throw these things away. But if we were able to save them, we would save that money. I think past that, you get into all right, well, how can we trust AI that it's going to save us that money? Right.
Yeah. I mean, I recently saw an article. This was maybe, I want to say it was in the past month, that talked about how most of the investments in AI haven't generated a return. Have you seen that?
I have, and I think what that is if I had to label it, that's propaganda. There's a lot that goes on both sides. I like articles where they present an idea, maybe like that, but then they're able to back it up
Yeah.
with data that they link a source to, right? Don't just show me your graph. Show me how you made your graph, right? That's the scientific process. Like repeatability is everything. Don't just show me how, your graph. Show me how you made your graph and where you pulled the data from. So
Note to self, don't tell the AI guy. AI doesn't have ROI.
sometimes I think it's hard. I get where you're going, and I
Yeah.
think and I struggle with this too. Like it's difficult to say to managers in a lot of cases, like They say, well, what is going to be the return on investment here? Well, it's difficult to estimate, like I could give you a number, but I can tell you that it's not going to match that number. It's going to be higher and it's going to be lower. There's going to be a lot of variance in it. It's like, let's go back to your case for not looking up the HR documents.
How do you
How do
quantify
you
that?
how do you quantify that?
Because you
Like,
could say, well, I'm getting 20% of my time back, but then if I don't use that 20% productively, then there is no return, right? But
right.
you're giving me the
Yes.
opportunity.
Well, not just that, like, think about, like, the sunk cost,
Yeah.
right? They're not gonna actually save any money because they're not gonna get rid of your time. You're just gonna be more productive with your time,
Yes.
right? And there may be limits to how productive you can be, and that's not on you. At the end of the day, what they're gonna wanna see on their receipt, right, when they go back and audit their records is, "Hey, we saved
Yep.
20% of your time." That's not possible, right? There's also this, right? How often are you actually at 20% looking up these HR documents?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's like an ebb and flow,
Right.
right? You can't give them an exact number unless it's like a part of the factory process. You can't give them a number on saved processes when it comes to like a day to day workflow,
Yeah.
right? But there's a consistent cost and schedule push for things like that. So,
So the use case we're talking about, right, has to deal with like individual contributors who are generating value somehow, right, or
yeah,
being productive. Figuring out how to manage that. You're right, because I was a production manager and a department manager for 4 years, and we live and breathe safety and bottom line. Those are
yes,
the things that we
yes,
are supposed to live and breathe anyway. Yeah, so you'd have to figure out how to measure that, maybe in your aggregate group, measuring their total increased output somehow, right?
right.
But
Yeah,
nevertheless, that is an easy way to get AI into the marketplace, right?
yes,
Or into the workplace, simply because you don't need fancy equipment. You don't need some setup on a production floor. You can just do it on a computer, like with an LLM or
yeah,
something like that.
yep,
You brought up, so I'm not maintenance.
right.
I've worked with maintenance planning, right? And I've had maintenance on some of my project teams, but I don't have that background. But I can tell you that in the past, I have seen plenty of times where companies will they let their machines dictate downtime on the line. They will run them till failure, okay?
Yep,
The line is like, and no matter what you do, that line, whatever line it is, whatever you're making, that line is going to come down. You have a
yes,
choice. You can either dictate when your machines are going to go down with preventive maintenance, or you can let the machine dictate when it's going to go down. And if you let it dictate, most of the time, the repair or the maintenance is more expensive and more time consuming because you have let something break at this point.
yep,
In a previous life of mine, that used to drive me crazy. I saw that all the time. I'm trying to manage a production floor, and all of a sudden, a machine goes down, and now my line is down for 2 hours.
yeah,
And I go to pull the maintenance records if they're there,
yeah,
right? But I can't find the PMs, or nobody can really tell me the last time, maintenance is done on this machine. So if you were able to use AI to monitor those things, it would tell you, like, if, so long as obviously you have to feed it the right data. You'd have to know what data to feed it, right?
right.
But once you got all that set up, and if you were feeding that model or neural network or whatever you guys call it, if you were able to feed it in real time, it could monitor in real time, and it could tell you when. I mean, let's go back to. I'm getting excited. Hold on, I'm
Yeah,
starting to
go ahead.
like.
It's good. I like for people to get excited about it. Yeah.
But I mean, just like think about it. It could chart control charts for you
Yes.
on all of this stuff about your machine. It could tell you when you're starting to get process drift,
Yep.
or a mean shift, or when points are out of control, and it can alert you. It could send out a freaking email, sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
And then next thing you know, all of a sudden, bam, okay, now I know this machine's starting to get out of control. I need to get my maintenance plan around it. I mean, like, that is a great way
Yeah,
to get AI on the production floor right there.
I totally agree. To bring it further, there are some situations, and I think this is probably one of the greater ways to do sort of automated procedural work, where you say something like you were saying, right? Like it's gonna send you an email. But to take that one step further, there are certain cases where you don't want it to send you an email, right? Like let's try to prevent that catastrophic failure, that run to failure, and say, hey, I'm seeing, deviations in the production. We're starting to get into, our the measurements on the out product at this section are becoming too far. And so what we're going to do is we're going to alert and we're going to shut the line down. can't use the product anyway that we're producing. So let's save material, do the maintenance to fix that part. And I'll give you an analysis that's like, hey, here are some of the things that I'm seeing elsewhere, right? Help you troubleshoot it.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of cases, and again, I don't know everything about manufacturing, but like as you're approaching that failure point, typically you start to see variations in your products. You start to see variations in how your product line is running, and those variations end up producing essentially waste, right?
Yep.
Because you have to throw some of that product away. So if you could stop before the part where you're having to destroy some of your material, which AI could do for you in an automated process. Let's stop the line. We're about to have to destroy material. It can alert you, ahead of time to say, hey, we're getting more variance, right? And if you don't do anything, I'm going to stop the line, right? As soon as we start to see a variance past this level. I know that historically we've called that condition-based maintenance, and it's typically been done in things like aircraft, where you have systems that monitor the aircraft, and it's like, look, hey, we're seeing such and such on this system, and you either like have to do maintenance in the next month, or sometimes it's like you need to turn around and land the aircraft right now. Like things are about to go real bad, and you don't want to be on board. So having those applications in manufacturing would be useful. I think they're getting cheaper. We talked about democratization earlier. That the thing that comes with democratization, the price comes down, right?
Yep.
Things get much, much cheaper. We talked about the Industrial Revolution before. The part that got democratized was everybody could afford a high quality shirt. At that point, it wasn't like 40 people like working together to like harvest cotton or hemp or whatever to make thread and then turn out a shirt as a village. It was production line. I think the democratization part of it is going to open up a lot of doors for a lot of industries.
Okay. Here's another use case for you. One of the first projects I had to run was actually to build a training program for a rather complex piece of machinery. I had to go learn the machine in order to build this program, right? And one of the things I found was that this particular machine was complex enough that there was no direct answer to a problem or to a setup
Yeah.
for the machine. If there was an issue in the setup, you basically had to troubleshoot because it could be 3 or 4 things you needed to change, right?
Yeah.
And it was difficult to teach these skills. And if people had questions, they'd have to wait for an SME or call an SME over, right?
Yes.
So from a training perspective, if you were to set up an LLM at, say, a computer on a workstation, and you trained it to your specific data set, or maybe just the documents that you want it trained on, you feed that to it, train it on that, you could allow your employees to quickly ask it a question like, hey, I'm having this issue, pull up the steps to solve it on my setup or
Yep.
whatever. Like it would give you that information on the floor right then. So that's one. And then just to shift that a little bit, quality. A lot of people use vision systems, and I don't know a bunch about vision systems and quality, but I can tell you that in my 10 years, I've never seen one work. Okay. I have seen them installed on lines and then not used because nobody could get them to work.
Yeah.
But AI could run that for you,
Yeah.
right? If you fed it on the right data set up your camera and let AI monitor your parts as they go through. It could tell you like, hey, you're still within tolerance, but you're starting to consistently see this issue,
Yep.
right? So very soon you may need to adjust something, and here's what you can adjust,
Right.
and here are the steps to do it, and here's how long it'll probably take you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Well, there's two things I like to pick apart there
okay,
is I think one, much larger companies that have manufacturing facilities, and I'm gonna pick on let's say a chip company. I think they have systems that are like that for quality already. They're probably not as sophisticated, but they do things like, get rid of like burnt chips. They get rid of like defective chips, and they use like air nozzles to like blow defective chips out of the line. Because classically, that was somebody's job, is to sit there and like pull chips off her. And that's not something that's naturally available in every production line. But I think just like you're saying with, the thing that's keeping people out of that oven, it's hot in there. You can't put people in there. That's too dangerous. People are not made to be in that environment, right? Now with artificial intelligence, we can do that. But I think going back to your other point about training and about learning about a certain system is that for my own personal use, I find AI to be an absolute necessity for me to learn new things now, because the rate at which I can learn something new is so
so
much
much faster.
faster.
Yeah, it is. It
And
really is.
and it does come back to, like, what you were saying is, like, you typically before what you had to do is, like, if you didn't understand something, you had to find a subject matter expert on it. And I know everybody's, in the industry for AI is saying, like, artificial superintelligence is something that's, like, a distant future. I would argue that in a lot of ways, it's already here. If we want to compare what you do with GPT versus, what you would have to do if you didn't have it, especially for learning, if I run up against something I don't know, and I want to learn more about it, I will go to GPT and I will say, "Hey, I've read these things about this," and I will present it with my argument, and then I will ask it to give me, like, the pros and cons of, like, my argument, and then tell me what I don't understand. Give me more resources of what I can look up to find out more. And I think a lot of that has to come down to you have to be open to knowing that you don't know enough, and
Yes.
some people don't do that.
That
They ask GPT out of the box to solve the problem for them, thinking that they already know the answer, when they only have, like, a single perspective. But then secondarily, like, you also have to give it an opportunity with enough information to know about what you are looking to look up. Some people want to go to it, and this is going back to, like, the hallucination problem, but people go to it and they don't give it enough context for what it's doing. If you can get past those barriers, taking this like a logical step forward. Maybe it's not a droid, like if we're thinking about Star Wars, that follows you around and, like, helps you figure things out. But maybe it is something that's like, that's already accessible to us now, where they can hold the power button on their phone and Gemini comes up or Grok comes up or whatever, and you can start having a conversation with it that's continuous about the thing that you're trying to figure out. You give it enough information to say, like, hey, I've got this new system that we're trying to install. It's from this company, and here's the documentation for it. And here's what I'm trying to install it on, right? Here's the application I'm trying to put it into. It does a really good job of, like, giving you generalized information that can help you understand the process better. And it does a good job of, like, looking up things in the documentation, helping you understand the specifics of how that thing applies. And I think that's a really good application for it.
mm,
So I think helping us extend ourselves beyond, like, our own capabilities. Like, I still feel like I'm valuable from my experience, but this, like, having an AI like an LLM helps me to extend that value. Not to say that I could be an SME in anything else, but it helps me to extend that value to the point where I can understand enough about
yeah.
this thing I'm dealing with without having to go get a subject matter expert. And again, that won't apply in all cases, but it's good enough to get by in a lot of cases, when it could cost extra money and extra time for you to have to coordinate with someone else who actually, fully understands that or has more experience than you really need. I just need to know what this thing means,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's a pretty positive application of it. So
Few years ago, right? When you first started talking about AI and I came over and you were showing me how to do it or how you build your models, and I didn't understand the use case, right?
yeah,
And I didn't know how it could help me in my job. And we got to talking about a toaster. Yeah, you knew I was bringing this one up, man. I love this one. I love this story. I tell it
yeah,
all the time. Anyway, and you got really excited. You got very animated and you were talking about this. And I was like, yeah, but what would my toaster have to say to me? And you said, don't worry about what your toaster can say to you. Think about all the interesting things you can say to your toaster. And then I went home, no joke, dude, same day. I went home, got home, I have a hardwood floor with a rug on it. And I was just looking around. I was like, man, my rug is dirty. I looked over at this robotic vacuum that my wife bought, and I was like, I wish I could just tell it to go over there and just just vacuum my rug and go
yes.
back. And then it immediately clicked. All the interesting things I could say to my vacuum.
Yeah, it's not that the value that you'll get out of being able to have your toaster comprehend the exact goldenness of the toast that you want. It's the fact that the communication is now a two-way street,
Yes,
right?
yes.
People will go around and talk to each other where we're naturally and by default set on this mode of interacting in human language. And when we have to, like, flip this switch for all the technology that we have to talk to it in Python or C sharp or C++, right? It's unnatural for us to do that. That's where the whole domain of software engineering comes from, is having people who are professionals and experienced in converting these requirements of natural language into something that the machine can understand
Yep.
with that language. And I think that barrier is also coming down, right? We're adding these natural language interfaces. And you're seeing this a lot in production with the stuff that's coming out with like MCP servers and the stuff that Google and Amazon and all of the web searches are doing, where they're converting, which is actually a really good example. People use GPT and Grok and these other services in Gemini over typical Google search. Typical Google search is actually a dying thing. And the reason is not because it wasn't good. It was great. But the language you use to search the internet is not the same language that you use to ask a question. Like some people were asking questions and they were getting answers back, and that was great. But the difference is that AI can now convert your question into the language of a search.
Yeah.
And then give you the answer back, or a well-rounded answer. That's the reason search is kind of dying. It's not because it was bad, or that someone came up with something better, or that people want the answer right away. It's that people didn't have search skills. It's not a natural language.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair.
Like I don't know how many times I've searched for something on the internet and could not find it. Not that it was like multiple pages deep. It's that I didn't know what to call the thing, right, to get the appropriate search results. But if I ask like a question contextually and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to do, and I don't know what this is, or I don't know how to look for this, what should I do? The model can convert that into the appropriate context and the appropriate search terms in order to retrieve the stuff that I need. It just makes it that much easier. So relating that back to your vacuum story, right? Like, right now, the vacuums I'm used to, random search pattern, right? You turn it on, the thing rotates based on a random number. It drives in that direction until it bumps into something, right? Vacuuming. Then it hits that random number generator again, right? And because of statistics, eventually it's supposed to cover your whole floor. So how do you get that mechanism? Because that's the way it's driven today. How do you swap that into something that's like, I just need you to vacuum the rug, just the rug, right? That can be done now with things like LLMs. It's to give it some contextual reasoning as to like, don't cover my whole house, man. Like, just, I'm standing right here by this rug, vacuum this rug, right? I think that transition is something that's happening today. And that's why I made the comment back then about the toasters. Like, this is going to revolutionize everything, because the way that people will use it will be revolutionary.
Yes. To round that story off, it never occurred to me until we were sitting here talking about it. Would you like to know the name of my robo vacuum?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Its name that my wife gave it many years ago when we bought it is not a toaster. How funny is that? Not a toaster is what it's called.
It makes it easier to identify on the network, right?
Absolutely,
You're like, this one's not the toaster. That must be the robot vacuum. I started a few home projects that are like trying to integrate that. One of the big pursuits that I had at work that I wanted to start building into our products is, like, I phrased as, look, mom, no keyboard, which is essentially like every product that we build, we should be trying to get rid of the keyboard. The keyboard is a barrier for doing actionable things while interacting with technology. Going back to a previous job where we talk about like maintenance, one of the big things that happens in maintenance when you're maintaining something is you either keep records for it, you're logging all of the things that you're doing to the assembly line, or you're doing that other process that you're talking about where you have something like a work package or some kind of maintenance manual that you're using, and you're going back and forth and like reading something about how to do that thing, right? Well, the reason that you have to go back and forth is because there's a screen, and so you have to read it visually. And secondarily, there's the keyboard. You have to go and type in new information. So you have to get up and move over to the laptop. You have to come back, get your wrenches, start working on the thing again. If we get rid of the keyboard and we make everything where it's like vocal communication, like you do with, say, like an assistant or something like that, from Choose Your Favorite Product, people aren't getting up and going over to the keyboard for maintenance anymore. They're keeping the wrenches in their hand. They're asking for information. And as long as that information is trustworthy, if we do our due diligence on the AI side, right, we keep that maintainer from having to get up to 600 times to go back and forth to the maintenance manual. As he's taking things apart, if he understands the procedure, if he's experienced enough, he can tell it to log the things that need logging, not asking it to say, hey, I'm going to do this job, make log entries or whatever for all of the things, which it could probably do a pretty good job of. But for instance, if you do like a lockout tagout procedure, right, being able to verbally dictate that as a log entry is better than having to do the whole lockout tagout procedure, and then walk over and then log everything in again, right? And there's lots of those that happen during the maintenance process that happen along a lot of complex maintenance protocols that if it's just a verbal communication, it's much easier to log. And because of that, people are more likely to log it because it's not something that's tripping them up during their process.
Oh man, you just gave me an idea.
Oh, good.
So I work with big data,
Yep.
right? Lots of data all over the place, right? And a skill that, well, you have to have for a role like mine is taking just raw data points and turning that into actionable knowledge. But there's been a lot of times where it wasn't just, oh, let me take this data and like drop it into Excel. I had to transform this data through multiple process steps. And so there's been times where like I would use an Access database at work and I'd dump it in there and I'd just parse it through a whole bunch of queries and then it would spit out this transformed data that I could then act upon or then I could then analyze and act upon. But with me, right, I have the memory of a goldfish, like ADD, hardcore. These tools that I've used and built a lot of times are very specific to the problem I'm working on, and they can be a little bit complex. And I do a terrible job of documenting my steps to the point where sometimes I can't even replicate my own work a
Yep.
month later. And just being able to like dictate it, and I don't mean just records that it records my raw,
Yes.
audio. I mean like take that raw audio, turn it into a concise, useful documented process that I could just go reference if
Yeah.
next time I needed it.
Or
So
even hand off to others, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And the technology for that, it exists already, right? Like there are LLM workflows already that exist that can do that. And the it's just like we were saying at the beginning, is providing that connection for people to understand, oh, hey, I can take these building blocks and now I've got all of my documentation problems are solved,
right,
right? I do it one time, and as long as I'm just like talking to myself and recording, right? I can then turn that into a transcript with something like ASR. And I can also take that transcript and I can have an LLM go over it and tell the LLM, "Hey, I want to turn this transcript into a documentation of a process for doing X." And it can rewrite the whole thing for me, right? Like by taking my own words of what I'm doing, and then I can proofread it and say, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell it at step X or whatever that I did this and I didn't say it, right? Like, but we can get into the habit of doing things like that because we're out there physically doing stuff if we just happen to carry microphones on us and hit record.
So I have a military background, and military background, 20 something years, manufacturing background, going on 11 years. I have never seen training in manufacturing get anywhere close to what I would consider sufficient to actually train people. Like the Army does it
Yes.
right
Yeah.
relative to a lot of what goes on here, right? I'll go back to that initial project where I had to build a training on this complex piece of machinery that would take months to train people on, right?
Right.
And we did it kind of in a, what do you call it, apprenticeship style thing, but that's kind of one-on-one, right? And if you're trying to train a bunch of people, like if you're trying to stand up a new facility with 3 shifts, like that is a bottleneck, it's a constraint in that.
Yes.
There was a disconnect between the people on the floor and the managers because the managers trust these guys that know what they're doing, but they still need information like, hey, where are they at in their training? How trained are they? What can they do on their own? Right? How much longer? And how do you quantify that? Right? How do you, okay, so I did that, right?
Yeah.
The way I did it was we went through, I sat down with my subject matter experts and I said, what are all, let's figure out and identify specific skills that are required. And I don't mean generic things like, oh, you need to be able to read a tape measure. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean things like, does the operator know how to interface with the machine, right? Does he know how to monitor the machine? Can he do a setup on this type of product? Can he troubleshoot? Well, first off, can he identify what he needs to troubleshoot? And then can he troubleshoot it, or she can, she troubleshoot it, so on and so forth.
Right.
So what I did was we got through and we continued to tweak that, but we listed all those skills and then we came up with a training plan for those skills, complete with objectives that they needed to learn, and then an assessment at the end. And we then organized all that into a way that they need to learn it. So we built a training plan with a standardized way to assess where they're at. But then, okay, that's great, right? So now you have data, but how do you know if they're on track to be trained, or if they can, really be trained on it? Once we trained like the initial set of operators, we then had all these data points on time. Basically, what I did was I set up on my y-axis, I set up from 0 to 100, their level that they were assessed at. Then on the bottom, on the x-axis, I charted time, right? And then I just started plugging in these data points for all these individual operators. And I basically took that on the chart that I had. You could see the line, the mean line on the chart going up for all the operators. And then you could see where 1 sigma was, and then where 2 sigma was, and then where 3 sigma was, right? On the chart, it was all built off of the data that I had. And then you could chart where operators were, so you would know if an operator was falling behind his peer group or not. Because if he was at the same point on the x-axis, but he was 2 sigma below where everybody else was at that time, then he's falling behind.
Yeah.
Right? So that was the way I set it up. You got to get useful information to the point where it's needed when it's needed, right?
Yes.
So that was the way I set up that program to measure where people are at and if they were falling behind or not, right? And how effective we were at training. I had some other metrics that trainers could use to grade themselves on. But if you set that up so that if you got that data and you measured it, then you took an LLM or whatever. I know we keep going back to LLMs, but most people know what an LLM is.
Yeah.
And you put that on the production floor so they could get their information and they could get it right then, right now. You could then chart that in the same way and see how much more
You could
you'd be
chart their
able to see how
learning
much more
rate.
faster
Yeah.
it is with AI. That would be a
Yes.
way
Yeah.
to measure that.
I think I agree. I think situations like that, if you were to implement artificial intelligence, I think it provides us, because of how much clearer the process of training would be, it offers us an opportunity to change the way that we treat training, which is not like a one size fits all. Like, here's a training curriculum and we're just going to like power through it. Everybody has to go the same speed. We go one pace, right? Because that's what we can afford. It gets into a situation because now you're measuring different students and seeing the different rates at which they're learning different material.
Yep.
To provide feedback for things like instructors to say, all right, I need to target this student because they're not grasping this process, right?
Yeah.
I need to change the way that they're interacting with that material, right? And you can see the ups and downs of each one of your students as they're going through the process to be much more efficient and much more successful with your training programs. It's a change from today where that, you don't have that visibility, right? And I'm sure it would be a paradigm shift in what the way your instructors are actually thinking about what it is that they're doing, where they're not just like people who are delivering curriculum. They're the people who are, the stewards of the trainees, right? So it would allow them to connect one-on-one and say, like, hey, I see you're struggling with this process. Like, tell me about what you think about that process and what you think of, the answers are, or tell me about that process, to have that open communication. Secondarily, it wouldn't just be on the instructors, right? Like we were talking earlier, like there would be an opportunity to insert large language models into that training process, where if someone didn't understand the process and they could obviously see their own scores going down, they could interview an LLM and be like, hey, here's what I'm doing. What am I doing wrong here?
Yeah.
Right? And its generalized background and expertise in a lot of things, like even if you grounded it in that process you're training on, could be very helpful, right? In helping that student progress on themselves, right? I think one of the things that's a hurdle is there's not enough time and there's not enough people to interact with every student. It's that one-on-one relationship that you need, that's like instructor student, to give that student, the quality of education that they need. You need like almost like a one-on-one, like the instructor needs to be there almost like a mentor,
Yeah.
right, to walk them through the process. With AI and with LLMs, everybody has their own mentor,
Yeah.
right? I even proposed this at one point to one of our training programs, where we say, let's start them out day one at school, right? We give them an LLM and we start logging every conversation that they have with that LLM, right? And we use that over time to sort of tune that LLM specifically into this student, right? And let's say that they're carrying that thing throughout the whole training process. They go through all of their school or whatever. One of the things that they're going to get out of that is that, for one, they're going to have someone that they can ask questions to the whole time. We can get a better understanding of what that student's grasping and what they're not grasping to get through the program, lower our attrition rates, right? Because attrition rates are really what cost you in training, is that you get someone halfway through the program, they quit, right? Or they fail out.
Yep.
Not only that, once they get done, right, they're used to interacting with this thing that helps them answer questions, right? And they probably have less and less questions as they learn what they're supposed to be doing. But if we made it where that thing's specifically tuned to that student, we could essentially take the weights of that model and give it to them to take during their career, right? So when they get out and they're actually doing the thing in the field, this thing understands like the highs and lows of this particular student. And as they're solving problems in the field, it can remind them like, hey, you remember this time in training where this was the problem, right? Like that's also a similar situation here. You need to make sure that you remember to do X or Y, right? Because that's one of your weaknesses, right? Is that you're not focused on this. And I'm going to help you focus on that. I would love to have that not just for training programs, right?
Yeah.
I have kids, and I think building a situation where you could have that like lifelong virtual mentor to help you connect with material, to help you understand the material, and to help you understand the material in a way that you enjoy. And I think that's really like where a lot of students get unplugged with stuff, is that and probably instructors, and it's our own fault just as societies, we build curriculums to be one size fits all. But what if we could build them to be customized per
Yeah.
student? Just one idea there.
No, that's a great idea. And to build off that, you were talking about, logging all the conversations they have with that. What can you do with that?
Well,
In
you mean,
addition to the individual, what can you do with that, Nathan?
well, you can analyze it. You can analyze it to find out where your curriculum is falling short,
Yes.
and you can analyze it to find out basically what your biggest problems with attrition are.
Yes. You can
So,
aggregate that data up to figure out how to improve your training program.
but the question today, right, is anybody even collecting that data? Just going out hypothetically here into the future. Maybe one of the effects of AI is we realize how much important data we're missing because we weren't collecting it. We
Yeah.
thought we were collecting the important data because of the assumptions we were making, but we might find out that we were collecting the wrong data to begin with, and maybe that was the problem.
Oh, yeah. No,
So,
absolutely. So I actually ran into that recently on a project where I set up a design of experiments. Uh, and went in and was like, yeah, I got all these factors. I'm gonna do my experiment. It's gonna be awesome. I'm gonna figure it out, right? Went in there and got all my data when I brought it back and did my analysis on it. None, not a single factor had a statistically significant p-value. I was like,
wow.
well, I found, I didn't fail. I just found 10 ways not to do it.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So I
okay.
think failure and reporting failure and documenting failure is probably one of the best ways that we can learn from the
Yep.
things that we do. And I highly believe that it's underdocumented and underreported. I need to know what roads not to take, right?
Yes.
That's just as important as the road that I'm supposed to take.
Yes,
So,
yes. I was just thinking about that. So as a project manager, we don't necessarily invent the wheel or reinvent the wheel. A lot of my projects are similar projects done in the past that, or my peers might be doing or have done in the past, right? And it would make me so much more effective, particularly if I'm not like super familiar with it, right? Like I've never done a greenfield project before. And I've told my boss that, hey, like that's on my development. I want to run a greenfield project one day.
eh,
He
can
laughed.
can
Go
you
ahead.
explain what a greenfield project is?
Yes, it's just an undeveloped site. Like if you
Okay,
were going to go open a new facility, open a new plant somewhere, like that is a greenfield project versus what's
gotcha.
called a brownfield project that's already been had some processing done to it in some way.
All right.
And he laughed and he said, "Well, everybody on the team has said they want to do a greenfield project, right? But one day I'll get my opportunity."
Right.
Um, and it would be it would help me as a project manager if I could just log in somewhere and say, hey, pull all the lessons learned from greenfield projects like this, pull all the things that I need to plan, all the little nuanced things I need to plan for, and give me the constraints and all that stuff. That would speed up the planning process of a project like immensely. But that goes back to training and goes back to it's my knowledge or my information, I want it now kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think people, or not people, but corporations and businesses are very weak in that area of getting information. And I don't mean like specific to my background or whatever. I just mean just general observations, right?
Right.
Very weak in getting information to the point where it is needed when it is needed right then.
Yeah.
So,
It's the Six Sigma of data,
yes.
right? You need the right data to make the right decision at the right time,
Yep.
right? Um, I think that's probably gonna be more true as the future goes forward, but I think it was already true before, and people maybe didn't realize it.
Yeah. Because really what you're doing at that point, if you get data when it's needed, where it's needed, at the time it's needed, what you really are building at that point is not a static process, but a dynamic one that can self-police or self-correct to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I'll go back to a job. One of my earliest roles in manufacturing, I was a production supervisor or an operations supervisor, but really I was over like shipping and inventory and that type of stuff. And my company had a goal to decrease inventory variation. Excuse me, to decrease inventory variation that we experienced each month. And they wanted, I think it was 95% inventory accuracy. But here's the deal. That's not really what they wanted. That's what they said they wanted. But the metric they set up wasn't, hey, do you know where 95% of your stuff is? It was, hey, do you have 100% or do you have 95% of your SKUs at 100% accuracy, which is much more difficult
Yeah.
because you can not know where 5% of your product is, but if that 5% is spread across half, a third of your SKUs, well, then you're not going to make it, right?
Right.
It took me about a year and a half to solve that problem, and I had to teach myself how to program, like how to code, how to write software. That was how I got into it because
Yeah.
I had to build
Yeah.
my own tools.
I think the jobs of the future are going to be very similar to what you just said. Every job in the future is going to be an AI job.
Yeah.
There aren't going to be any jobs left out, right? If you work at a fast food joint, doesn't matter. Like, you're going to need to know how to appropriately use artificial intelligence. And to some extent, some of the jobs are going to require you to have a little bit of programming knowledge to understand what's happening in the background. So,
Uh, I remember after I got it solved, I was the only one in the company to solve it. And I remember at a C-suite level member come down to see how I had solved it. And then she had her direct reports, some of the senior managers come down because they wanted to figure out how to replicate this. So I showed them my warehouse and how I was doing inventory and all the different metrics and monitoring systems that I had manually programmed, right?
yep.
And all of it wasn't around making sure that I had this box of product on this particular shelf. That was not what it was. It was when my warehouse operators went to look for something, it just told them exactly where it was. And then it would tell me at any given time, hey, you had this order and you pulled this stuff, but there was a scan and now your inventory is off. You've scanned something out of inventory. You've scanned the crimson screws out versus the red screws.
Yeah.
And by the way, you scanned them onto this truck into this box out there. And the first time that I got it working, like the first day, that exact scenario happened. And I went into my loading crew and I said, "Hey guys, uh, you palletized the wrong box." And they were like, "No way, no way, no way we did that." And I was like, "Well, I mean, that's what the system's telling me. I need you guys to go untarp that truck, depalletize that pallet, find that box and fix it." And they were like, an hour later, they come back in and they say, they hand me the box of crimson screws and they're like, "Screw you, boss." And they walk out. They went back to go palletize the truck. But so that system worked, right? And they came down to the C-suite executives and their guys came down to see it, and then we all sat in a conference room. They were talking about, well, how do we set up a warehouse, et cetera, et cetera. And they kept talking about well, we need these screws. We're going to need this many inventory slots, and we should order this many screws, and this is just where they're always going to be. We're going to set it up static like this. And they all looked at me and they're like, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think you guys are going down the wrong road." It's like, I don't care where you put this box of screws at in my warehouse. All I care about is that I know where it's at when I need to know it, and then I'll just go get it.
Yes.
And they all kind of looked at me like, kind of like, oh, it kind of clicked a little bit. So that's what I mean by a dynamic system, right? And I feel like AI is a great way to monitor that and self-police and self-correct on that.
Yeah, I'm going to bring this full circle here
Okay.
because I really like this. I like this story. So, e- essentially summarizing what you're saying, it's not the placement of the product that was the hurdle, right? The search was the hurdle,
Yeah.
right? And bringing this back to what I was saying about Google, the search is the hurdle,
Oh yeah.
right? Inserting AI into those systems where you may not know how to look for the thing that you're looking for, but you know that you need it.
Yeah.
The thing that taking this over to a Six Sigma field, right? Um, they talk about like having the things in the right place at the right time, and that's what really like increases the efficiency. A lot of the hurdles for processes isn't that the material doesn't exist or that it isn't there. The reason that it's not there at the right time is because you have to search for it,
Yeah.
right? It's the search. Anytime that we have a process and you insert the word search at some point in that process, you are costing yourself time. But if you can start clipping those areas of search out of your process, right? You're increasing the efficiency. It's already there. People aren't having to stop what they're doing. Change gears is what we call it, to where they're going into search mode to look for that thing, right? And then having to come back and like reinsert themselves into the process.
Yeah. Yep.
Secondarily, I think there's a point that you may be making this story that a lot of people typically leave out, and it's something that we're accused of doing on the engineering side a lot. And I'll own up to it that it does happen a lot. I think the value that you placed on understanding the workflow before doing the implementation, right? You talked about adding in these software processes so that you could help make your workflow processes more efficient. That's not possible until you understand what the workflow is. I think a lot of the current market for AI tools, I think a lot of the current market for a lot of tech tools that they go in with the assumption of this is great for this one task that I'm doing, and maybe it is, I don't want to knock them for the thing that they built. They put a lot of work into it. But at this secondarily, the people they're trying to sell to, they operate in a workflow, some established workflow that's worked for their company usually for years. And if you don't understand how your product fits into or changes that workflow, you don't effectively understand the ROI. You don't effectively understand how they can implement it, and you don't effectively understand the use case for that company, right?
Yep.
It's going to make it very difficult for you to connect with them. Just bringing up in your story, right? Like I think that's extremely important, and I appreciate you bringing it up. I would like to transition a little bit
Sure.
to sort of separate topic.
Okay.
One of the things that I think is important to both sides is understanding the hurdles. Like we've talked a lot about how great things can be, what it can change, but uh, I think we should talk a little bit about understanding what the barriers to entry are for companies that want to start using AI. How do they how what are some of the things that they have to overcome to start doing that, right? It might be like policy process or even money or hardware or whatever. But I'd like to talk a little bit about like for your company, for the things that you've proposed, what have been some of the things that have been pushed back, or at least some of the things that have stuck in your mind for things that stand in the way of a company implementing AI into their current processes?
Well, monetary barriers. All right. You guys as data scientists are expensive.
We are so expensive. And I have to say, personally, the way I feel about it, it just feels like greed, honestly. Because I, I have, and I won't dig too deep into this, but I honestly think most of us are overpaid, and like the direction that things are going, it's just going to become more and more evident, right? And some of the people in the AI industry have started to realize, especially because of software democratization, like we are probably going to be the first people to go. Like as soon as AGI comes around and it can self-edit and self-optimize, no one's going to pay for an AI engineer because it will be able to AI itself, right? It will be able, you'll just be able to talk to it and then it'll fix your problem because it'll figure it out and self-optimize. I think maybe some AI engineers aren't like privy to the fact that like, yeah, that's what's going to happen. Like the first thing we're going to optimize is ourselves and optimize ourselves right out of a job, right? So I think it's valuable to have like a breadth of experience in a lot of different areas. My background, aerospace and mechanical and reliability engineering, and understanding how AI applies to those regions is going to be helpful for when that happens. But yes, like the price for our work is way inflated. Yes.
All right. So the second one, it has a lot to do with just human nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, think about in terms of tech adoption, like the distribution, right,
Yeah.
of tech adoption across the human race. We're creatures of habit. It is very like once we get comfortable doing something, it's very difficult to get people to change. I mean, like
Yeah.
change management is a thing, right?
Yep.
Uh, I remember I was trying to change a process, maybe 5 years ago at one of my earlier companies, and I just had a guy, dude. I loved him to death. He was so smart. He was hands down like one of my most technically savvy people, and was important to my operation. But the dude hated change. He
Yeah.
hated change. And me and him were constantly like in a good professional way, right?
Right.
Going back and forth about it. I finally got him to admit, he's like, I was like, why don't you want to try it? He goes, because I just don't like change. And so that is a barrier. That's a huge
Yes.
barrier.
Human nature.
The other one is, and I know we're 7 years into AI now, 5 years into
We're
it.
we're we're way deeper than that.
Okay.
But
But we're
yeah,
still on
yeah,
the I kind of think of it well, I know that from your perspective, we are much deeper than that, but I
yeah.
always think about it of like when was it introduced to the masses as a
So
technology?
we'll call that modern AI.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and in my head, that milestone was ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I could be wrong,
Well,
but
a
that was
lot a
where
lot of people, yeah, that was the milestone. So
okay.
we'll put a marker at like 2018, 2019.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so that's still really new in the grand scheme of things.
Yes.
And early adopters of technology are just a very, very small percentage. I remember studying this in my MBA over at UAH. I can't remember the specifics, but it's a very small sliver of early adopters, right?
Yes.
And there's not a lot of where it's growing every day, but it's the reason why we're doing this podcast, right? People don't know
Yeah.
they're they don't have examples of it. And then you have early adopters like myself, um, who don't just see the process for what it is. They see it for what it could be,
Yeah.
right? And when you're talking about brand new change like that, man, it can be difficult to get people on. There have been
Yeah.
studies that show that when you try to introduce change like that, statistically, like you have to let like one out of I don't remember the number. I'm not going to put a number out there, but there are some people who just won't adopt it that you have to find another job or let them go.
Yeah.
Like that is legitimate, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I believe a reference for that, I believe, is in Good to Great, right?
I've
And
read that book.
they say you have to get the right people on the bus.
Yes.
And part of that can be getting the wrong people off the bus, right?
Yes.
Not to say like I don't want it to sound as callous as you got to fire some people,
Right.
but in a lot of ways, if you tell somebody where a bus is going, they're willing to get off,
Yeah, that's
right? They
fair.
don't want to go there. So they're willing to get off the bus for you,
That's
right?
fair.
So,
Yep. So that's the other one. So, not a lot of use cases out there that have been proven on the floor that are common knowledge. And then you've got human nature itself, which is averse to change. And then there, of course, is the monetary value of setting that up. I have no idea how much it would cost me. And I'm a proponent of this, but I
yeah,
have no idea how much would it cost me to have someone come in, set up a system that can monitor my process and do whatever I need to do, right?
yeah,
Um, and then, I'm a project manager now, so I have to deal with project finance, right? But before that, I managed the P&L, and I was responsible for the bottom line. I had to report that out monthly, and it wasn't always fun if I didn't have a good month to report it out.
yes.
So how getting use cases out in the market and then proving that they do drive value and will add to the bottom line is another example of like a barrier to
Yes.
implementation
Yeah.
because I referenced that study that um, you chuckled and said propaganda, right? But it's a new technology, so it doesn't surprise me that a lot of companies aren't getting a return on investment because nobody like people are it's R&D. People are
Yes.
exploring, and how do you put a timeline and how do you put a a dollar value into to R&D? I don't know. I've never been in R&D,
I've
but
worked in R&D for a long time, and I will say that a business management is, while they are two sides of the same coin, you can tell that they are opposite sides, right?
yes.
There's no argument there. But I would to put it in a different perspective, right? I would compare making those changes to evolution, right? The thing and research is evolution. The the thing about evolution is change is dangerous,
Yeah.
right? To get that competitive advantage in the ecosystem or in the market, you have to change. To be new and provide a new capability, you have to change. Nobody gets it without changing. The problem is that 99% of changes for evolution go extinct, right? So there's an inherent risk in making those changes, right? So people want to hedge their bets a lot. Um, it's typically why you see a lot of companies who actually have a healthy relationship with research. They do sort of like an 80-20 split with their funding. They take a cut of their funding off the top to put into R&D. But the ones that have that healthy relationship with it, they're not sticking it into R&D and saying like, build me a product out of this. They're saying we understand that 99% of the things that are going to come out of this are going to fail,
Yeah.
right? But
And that's okay.
it's okay. That's fine because that 1% that comes out could be such a paradigm shift and could overhaul the entirety of what we do to make us so much more competitive that we take our market share uh, and we increase it like tenfold, right? We go from let's say a company of 200 people to 2,000 people because now we're so much more efficient, right? Or we're doing things differently, or we offer a product that no one else has, and we have this competitive advantage. I think comparing that, evolutionarily, that's what is happening in the evolutionary cycle of companies. Is like some of these companies though don't really understand how to involve that into their systems, and they don't really understand how can we compete and also spend, some percentage on R&D at the same time. And I get that. It's always a budget crisis.
Yep.
Like it's always a budget crisis. So, a lot of them I think like to wait until someone else does the R&D,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
they lean on academia or other groups, and then they want to adopt it afterwards, right? But then you're kind of behind. So
Yep.
it's reactionary evolution
Yeah,
in that way. So
absolutely. I was going to give you another barrier: infrastructure, like the actual infrastructure you need to set this stuff up. And going back to one of the examples I used at the beginning of our conversation was talking about climbing into that machine that's really hot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I pitched that idea because I knew it would work,
Right.
right? But
Yeah.
I pitched the idea and got a little bit of traction with the R&D team, and they started asking, well, what kind of camera do we need? What type of camera should we use to do this? And I was like, dude, I don't know. No idea what type of camera. And
Yeah.
I have no idea what else, you would need. So
Right.
figuring out the infrastructure to implement um, AI into your operation on the plant floor is another barrier because I just don't personally know of anybody who knows. We're
Right.
just having to figure it out as we go along.
Yeah.
So that is certainly another barrier to that entry.
It's about getting the right expertise together.
Yeah.
I would like to say that I know, but to be honest, I'm not familiar with your process, right?
Mhm.
I don't know what that oven does to know like what kind of camera to buy. What I could tell you is that for the AI stack, I know exactly what to get, but and what models to use and what to do. The problem would be like I would, you have to have that teamwork. And how do you find the right people if you want to contract this out that can work intrinsically with your company that can fit in and do the agile process if you're familiar with that uh, to be able to get that innovation done versus if you have your own internal team, how do you set up your culture and your workflow for that internal team to be able to come in and make innovations for you at that time?
Yep.
So yeah, I agree. It's sort of like a process culture barrier, where it's like, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know who to turn to. Hopefully, this podcast is helping people learn who to turn to, because it's not like I asked you to come here and talk to me about this to like raise awareness and things like that. But secondarily, like this isn't just about like getting people to call me.
Yeah.
It's about getting people to understand people from different backgrounds. And if they want to call you and ask you like, "Hey, what did you do to fix that problem? We have a very similar problem," right? They can call you, ask you for expertise, right? To be able to share that knowledge. And that's kind of bringing it the value of what we're sort of recording here back to the local area, right? We're not talking about somebody over in Silicon Valley who did a thing, which you could very much probably email that person, and I'm not trying to knock the value of them, but if you need somebody to come stop by your shop and say, "Hey, we do this, what did you do to change it?" Right? They've got local people that they could turn to ask those things, to talk about how they can shift their enterprise or shift their workflows or their structure
Yep.
to make things better or more efficient. So yeah, I totally agree with that. So thinking about like in the far future, right? What do you think like as AI is coming along and some of the things that you can see changing now? What do you think the far future looks like for manufacturing and process engineering?
I'll preface my answer with I have not like put a whole lot of thought in that, but I have
Okay.
put a little bit. And it will make us less reactive to issues in our systems and our processes. It will help us become proactive, right? In the sense that it can actively monitor leading indicators versus lagging indicators. And it will be able to flag for us issues that it sees in our processes well before they become problems and give us time to fix it, right? Like we were talking about process drift and mean shift earlier. It will be able to actively monitor that in real time without you having to do it. So that's one way. Another one is like vastly improving training and knowledge management is another way. Give me my information right now and don't make me spend 2 hours or 4 hours trying to analyze it and transform it. So that's another way. And then helping people or allowing processes to be more dynamic. Having a more dynamic system and having a way to monitor it and self-police to an extent is the way that I see it in the distant future. And when I say distant, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years, something like that. Changing manufacturing, helping us see problems or helping us see issues before they're problems ahead of time. Those are the ways that I see it now. But I am constrained by the fact that it's not out there really, yet on the floor. So there could be a whole slew of ways that that it's going to be implemented, and it will be really
Yeah.
interesting to see just how it does change manufacturing in 10 years. And in 10 years, I'm gonna come back and listen to this podcast, and we'll see how right it was. We'll see, man.
Yeah, we'll
We'll
see.
see if I can see what it could be, really. But
Well, I do want to thank you for coming. Thank you for sitting down and talking about this. I think it's extremely valuable to people who are in the manufacturing industry or the people around Huntsville, around the country. Secondarily, not just for manufacturing, I think it's valuable for your customers, right?
oh
To
yeah,
understand what you're doing to improve your processes, what you're doing to help cut costs for them to procure your items, and for them to understand what the manufacturing process is going to look like in the future as they continue to buy your products and integrate them into their own workflows.
yeah, man.
So thank you for coming.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure being here. And